Thank you, thank you. I want to welcome you to the Brecht Forum. For those you know now, the Brecht Forum is a Vascular Lab cultural and global center that very proud to say we're celebrating our 35th anniversary this year. For more information on Brecht events, you can check it out, our website out at www.brechtforum.org. And on behalf of the Brecht Forum, I'd like to say thank you for coming out and enjoy.
Hi, my name is Michael Johnson. I was a participant in the World People's Conference on Climate Change. Here at this table we have some very distinguished guests who are going to speak to us today on the subject of climate change and environmental justice. To our left, well, to my far right, your left, we have Ambassador Pablo Sol, who's a principal negotiator in climate change policy. Ambassador Sol is the ambassador of the plural nation state of Bolivia to the United Nations, one of the designers of the World People's Conference on Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth, due in April 2010. Formerly Bolivia's ambassador for issues concerning immigration and trade, he also served as secretary of the Union of South American Nations from 2006 to 2008, and as President Evo Morales' delegate in Strategic Reflections Committee for South American Integration in 2006. An activist as well as a diplomat, Ambassador Sol has worked for years with different social organizations, indigenous movements, workers' unions, student associations, human rights, and cultural organizations in Bolivia. He is the son of famous Bolivian muralist Walter Sol Romero Gonzalez. And after Ambassador Sol, we're going to have Father Miguel sitting to my right. Father Miguel was elected president of the 63rd session of the United Nations General Assembly on June 4, 2008. A veteran spokesman, politician, community leader, and priest. Father Miguel served for over a decade as the Republic of Nicaragua's Minister for Foreign Affairs, a post he held from July 1979 until April 1990. During his tenure, he played a key role in the peace process to end internal armed conflicts in Central America. Also at the time, he spearheaded the government's decisions to bring to the International Court of Justice a claim against the United States for supporting military and paramilitary actions against his country, with the court subsequently ruling in favor of Nicaragua. As a participant in the World People's Conference on Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth, Father Miguel presented his vision as an international climate justice tribunal. The proposal was incorporated into the People's Accord, adopted by more than 30,000 climate justice advocates who attended the conference. And to my left, we have Monique Harden, co-director and attorney for Advocates for Environmental and Human Rights in New Orleans. On Tuesday, April 20th, 2010, just as the World People's Conference on Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth was starting in Cochabamba, Bolivia, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig blew up in the Gulf of Mexico, killing some 11 oil workers and launching one of the most serious environmental crises in United States history. When she returned from Bolivia to her home in Louisiana, Monique began defending the rights of those impacted by the Gulf disaster. Having worked for the past 5 years to defend the victims of Hurricane Katrina, it was not the first time Ms. Harden has fought for environmental and human rights and for those impacted by man-made disasters in the Gulf. Since 1996, Ms. Harden has provided legal counsel and advocacy support that have helped community organizations win important environmental justice victories. In 2003, along with Natalie Walker, she co-founded Advocates for Environmental and Human Rights. Headquartered in New Orleans, Ms. Harden is a graduate of University of Texas School of Law in 1995. Received a BA from St. John's College in 1990. She has authored and co-authored numerous reports and papers on environmental justice and human rights issues. Her advocacy work has been featured in television, radio, print news, as well as books, magazines, and documentaries. Tanya Fields from the Bronx is an activist, social entrepreneur, and mother in the South Bronx, a community known for environmental injustice. As a member of Mothers on the Move, Tanya recently won a lawsuit in conjunction with other South Bronx residents to shut down a human waste processing plant that has plagued her community with asthma and putrid odors for over 15 years. Formerly the Outreach Coordinator for Sustainable South Bronx, Tanya linked in innovative pioneers in urban sustainability with grassroots social organizing. She is currently advocating for the first Hunts Point farm share, Libertad, and creating a women and youth-led farmers market. As a delegate to Cochabamba, Tanya traveled with her newborn daughter, Lola, and connected with other indigenous mothers from throughout the Americas and the world. As the founder of Black Girl and Media, a media company that seeks to unite women, seeks to unite women of the diaspora through media, entertainment, and community projects, Tanya is linking local environmental justice issues with global climate change and making sure women and people of color are on the forefront of the movement. So welcome all to this event. Thank you for coming. Let's give a round of applause for our guests. So we're going to have first we're going to hear from Ambassador Salone. And after we hear from all our speakers, I would like, if you all have any questions, we have a gentleman standing right here to my left, your right, who will have the some papers you can drop down any questions you might have, and we'll have our panelists here answer your questions. And after that, we'll also have a strategy session to determine ways we can move forward. So this is not just talking, but action. So welcome all, and thanks for coming. Ambassador Salone, please.
Thank you very much for the invitation. For me, it's a pleasure to be here with you to discuss an issue that is very important. What is happening, they have asked me, in the negotiations on climate change in the UN. Where are we now? Well, when we came out from Cochabamba, Bolivia, with some key proposals. I would summarize them in mainly 6 proposals. One was to try to stabilize the temperature in this century in an increase of no more than 1 degree Celsius and 300 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. This is, I would say, the heart of the negotiation. Because in order to achieve this, developed countries have to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in the next 7 years by more than 50%. And that is the proposal for Cochabamba. In the case of climate change, what you don't do now, you're not going to do it tomorrow. So if you don't reduce now the greenhouse gas emissions, they are going into the atmosphere. And you're spending the budget, the carbon budget that we have. And if we want to stabilize the temperature well below 1 degree Celsius, we cannot keep sending this amount of greenhouse gas emissions to the atmosphere as we have been doing it now. So the key part of the negotiation is, are developed countries going to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in an amount that is around 50% for the next second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol? Yes or no? The developed countries have made a proposal that is actually on the table, and that is to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 13 to 17%. But this 13 and 17% is not net, because they are saying that in order to reduce this, they need flexibilities. Flexibilities from a new market mechanism, so that they can buy certificates from emission reductions that are being taken by our countries, the developing countries, and account them as those emission reductions were done in the developed countries. So at the end, the real reduction, and I'm not speaking about our analysis, I'm just quoting what the European Commission has said, is that the emission reduction could be only a reduction of 2%, taking into account the levels of 1990. So that means that the temperature can increase in more than 3 to 4 degrees Celsius in this century. So this is something really very bad. During these months, the negotiation on this issue hasn't moved. Even what we have seen in Pakistan, in Russia, in India, developed countries have not increased their pledges of emission reductions. And the position of the United States, because you know that the Act on Energy has been withdrawn from the Congress, has sent a signal to the whole negotiation that because the United States is not going to move in the short term, then other developed countries say, we don't have a reason to move, because if we do it so, we're going to be in a bad situation to compete with the American production. So on this key issue, the situation is very dark, I would say. We are going to a new round of negotiation. It's going to be in China. It's going to be in 10 days. And there we will see if there is a movement from developed countries in order to reduce significantly their greenhouse gas emission. The second proposal of Cochabamba was that we want those reductions to be done domestically and without any market mechanism, so that they are really true emission reductions inside developed countries. We have managed to include this proposal and the previous proposal in the text. Now we are going to go to negotiate, because there are two proposals on the table. One that is being promoted by a vast majority of developed countries and developing countries too, in order to promote a new market mechanism for carbon offsets. And we are very afraid that probably in Cancun, we are not going to reach an agreement on the issue of how to stop the increase in the temperature. But there is a probability that they are going to be able to impose an agreement to establish a new market mechanism. Because many are advocating in relation to having this new big market mechanism that from our point of view, especially when it comes to forest, will create a new form of privatization of forest. What we are, the danger that we have is that in Cancun, we can come out with what is called RED, reduction of emission for deforestation and degradation of forest, in a way that our forests, especially in developing countries, are reduced to what now we begin to hear, carbon rights. They say, we are not going to privatize the forest, you are going to own the forest. But there are going to be some carbon rights, like intellectual property rights, carbon rights. The capacity of the forest to capture CO2 will be certificated, and we will be able to sell those carbon rights in a world market. So somebody outside our country will not own the forest, but will own the capacity of the forest to absorb the greenhouse gas emissions, the CO2. But the forest is not a sink of carbon. The forest is our Mother Earth. It's biodiversity. You cannot separate that function from the forest. So this is something to be worried about, because we must be very clear. In Cancun, there is the possibility that we are going to end up with not a solution for climate change, but with a big business for those that want to make profit out of the tragedy that means climate change. The other proposals that came out of Chabamba were mainly, we want to really solve this problem that has to do with the imbalance between human activity and nature, and how to establish harmony with nature. From our point of view, we need to change the way we relate ourselves with nature, with our environment. We cannot see nature as an object, as something that we can own, that we can commodify, that we can sell. We think that nature is part of a system of which we also belong to. And the problem that we have is that we are all part of a system, a very interdependent system, but only one part has rights, humans, but not nature. And we think that in order to establish balance, one thing that we must promote is that also Mother Earth and nature has rights. It has to have the right to exist, to live. It has to have the right to regenerate. It has to have the right to live not in a contaminated environment. So for us it is very important how we're going to establish harmony with nature. We say through market mechanisms, that is one proposal, or recognizing that humans have to change the way they relate to our Mother Earth. This proposal, after a very difficult fight, is now on the table. We're going to go to discuss it in China. And we hope to keep it until Cancun. The other key proposal has to do with the issue of intellectual property rights. What this has to do with climate change? Because in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, you need to use clean technology. Developing countries need to receive from developed countries that technology. There is an obligation already acknowledged in the Convention on Climate Change that developed countries should transfer technology to developing countries. But one of the main obstacles has to do with intellectual property rights. So the main proposal of Cochabamba is, when it comes to technology for climate change, life is in front of patents. The majority of patents are developed through public finance. If they are developed through private finance, they should remain in the public domain and not should be privatized through patents. Any country should have the right to use any kind of technology in order to confront this situation and not be abused with payments very high of royalties in order to have access to those patents. This is another very difficult discussion. It is on the table, and we will have to discuss it in China and in Singapore. And we have put on the table something about what Father Miguel is going to speak about, that is the Climate Justice Tribunal. Because on the issue of climate change, we have the Climate Change Convention, we have the Kyoto Protocol, but in reality, the mechanism, the compliance mechanisms are very weak. So we need to have a mechanism of compliance that if you really don't follow up with your commitments, there is some way that you can be sanctioned And so we have said we need to develop a climate justice tribunal in order that whatever commitment is agreed, that commitment stays not in black and white, but it comes into reality. Of course, this climate justice tribunal is just the first step, because the proposal of Cochabamba is to go even into an environmental and climate justice tribunal, something bigger and broader. This is another proposal that it is very, very difficult to accept for developing countries, because developing countries say, we are responsible for the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions. If there is a climate justice tribunal and in the future there is a tragedy in any developing countries, we can be sued under this climate justice tribunal, so we want to avoid that possibility. So it is very difficult to get this out of the negotiation. And here I just want to finish. The only way that we are going to be able in Cancun to move forward is if there is a very big social pressure. If there is no mobilization from social movements, from civil society, from students, NGOs, indigenous people, peasants, trade unions, what can happen in Cancun is that we will end up with a declaration that mainly won't do nothing but to postpone the solution until the next conference of the parties that will be in South Africa in December. So Cancun will be just one more meeting that hasn't solved the issue. We can end in Cancun with some kind of decisions that open a new market mechanism so that even gets the situation worse. And the only way that we can really stop this and promote a real alternative is if there is a very big pressure on this. We have been in the World Social Forum of the Americas in Asunción, Paraguay just a few weeks ago with President Morales, discussing with different leaders of different networks, social movements, how to organize the mobilization to conclude. Because that is the key. What we can do inside the UN as negotiators is just one part. And we are not going to be able to win if the people don't mobilize. That is why I really think this meeting we have is very important. Because only through this kind of meetings we are going to be able to change the course of these negotiations and say humanity as we know it and life on earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pablo. I'd like to begin by expressing gratitude to Max Uhlenbeck and to Jeff Jones for the opportunity to meet with you today. You know, I haven't been in the States for too many days, and I'm making a quick round around the whole world. From here, I go tomorrow to India, from India to Japan, from Japan to Mexico, and back to Nicaragua. But I was getting a feeling here that I don't perceive a sense of urgency with regard to the crisis, the multiple crises that the world is facing today. But yesterday, in a meeting that was a kind of a prelude to this meeting now, I was able to perceive that there are some people who are on fire and who really inspire me. And I think this is a continuation of that gathering that we had yesterday. You know, our Lord Jesus, He he said, I have come to bring fire to the earth, and I wanted to kindle. That means to say passion for justice, for brotherhood, for sisterhood, for freedom, for true democracy, not this demagoguery that in this country they call democracy. And so I'm happy to be here. I have written something that now doesn't seem to, I'm going to follow what he was saying and forget a bit of what I have written because it's more real. But I will begin, first of all, many people say, well, what is this thing about climate justice? And climate justice tribunal, what is a newfangled kind of thing, and you're always inventing something new. Well, what happens is that Aristotle used to remind us that unlike what happens with animals, human beings are not born with instincts. We don't have instincts. And he says, Aristotle used to say, the only instinct or quasi-instinct that we are born with is called synthesis, which could be described as a predisposition or an inclination to want to do good and avoid evil. But nothing tells us exactly what is that good that we're supposed to do and what is that evil that we're supposed to avoid. That is the task of our whole life. That is the task of human history, to discover more and more and to conscientize ourselves and to our consciousness to grow. And many, many years ago, humankind began, in that place of the world that is being blasted out of existence in Iraq. That's where they began the codification of law with the Hammurabi Code was the first codification. We have a replica of it in the United Nations near the President of the General Assembly's office. But anyway, it goes. When I was a little boy, they were talking about women's rights. Well, they were still talking about women's rights, but they used to say, some people used to question, what is this about women's rights? Where do you get the crazy idea that women have rights? And so now they say, where do you get this crazy idea that the earth has rights, Mother Earth? This sounds like hippie kind of language. In fact, President Morales, God sent him at the right, precise moment, because had he come to the World Forum 20 years ago, 25 years ago, they would have said he's a hippie. But he came now, at a moment when science is coinciding exactly with what he says. For example, you have the leading biologist in the world, recognized as perhaps the leading, Edward O. Wilson from Harvard University. He's been teaching there 50 years. And both in his Future of Life, that's the title of one of his books, and then his very latest book, he's saying the same things that President Morales explains to us in a more moving and tangible and convincing manner. James Lovelock in the United Kingdom, in his 8 books, including his very last one, The Final Alert, saying the same thing. There is an element. I would be happy if I saw not only fire and passion, but if I saw also the sense of urgency. Because time flies. It really goes away. It ends. And we don't have that much time. We have squandered and wasted time by the practices that developed in the world, especially since the Industrial Revolution. You know, it isn't that the Industrial Revolution invented capitalism. Capitalism is the most contrary doctrine to the teachings of Jesus. There's nothing that could be more contrary. It tells you that you have to be more, and that's good. But it tells you that to be more means to have more. And Jesus says, yes, you got to be more. But to be more means to have a bigger heart. So you can embrace more and more people. To be more is to love more, not to have more. To give more of yourself is to be more, and that's what we should strive. Some people say, well, no, what happens, capitalism is too ambitious. No, they're not ambitious enough. We are ambitious because we want to love as Christ loved, and that's almost, an extreme ambition. But at any rate, I mentioned this idea of Aristotle talking about this quasi-instinct called synthesis. He called it synthesis. This instinct that inclines you to try to do good and avoid evil, but doesn't really tell you what is the good that you should do and evil that you should avoid. But the more developed people have synthesis, the more quickly it recognizes the good to be done. And there's a good example that I'd like to. The Industrial Revolution was the greatest tragedy in the history of mankind. The greatest tragedy for the working class in our Western world. And compare two people, reaction to that. One, the Pope, Pius IX, Pio. He was concerned during the Industrial Revolution about being declared infallible or some foolish thing like that, but that was his fundamental concern. Being declared, I think he wanted to be declared bad, but he was satisfied if it was declared infallible. Okay, at that same time, another man, Karl Marx, was witnessing what was happening in the coal mines in Scotland. And his conscience, he says, that's bad, that is wrong. And he began to explain to us how capital works and how you have to organize to defend yourselves against this thing that is being unleashed. And so there are two people living at the same time, reacting totally different, or one not reacting at all, and the other one, Marx, trying to help. Marx, in fact, became the conscience of the world, not the Pope or the church or any church. 40 years later, in order to make up for this negligence, Leo XIII comes out with a new encyclical, Rerum Novarum, concerning new things. And he says, and then that encyclical because of the influence of an American bishop, put a line in there that says people have a right to create organizations to defend their rights. The Pope was going to condemn the idea and the concept of unionism, but he did not condemn it. Because the Pope, in fact, said we had a right to create unions and to establish workers' rights, and to go to court and to have tribunals to judge when these rights of the workers were violated. Many or most hierarchies, Catholic around the world, did not publish the encyclical. As one example, in Chile, for example, the Episcopal Conference in Chile forbade the translation of that encyclical and punished with the threat of excommunication anyone to translate it into Spanish and to spread it. Rafael Agustín Gumucio, 35 years after Rerum Novarum was published, did it. And so it's a struggle. We are living now at a very interesting moment. Great scientific advance. More in the, perhaps most of all, in biology. Biology has developed more in the last 40 years than in the previous 10,000 years. And so we now know that we are not tourists on Earth who have gone in some safari, and that we're to exploit and dominate this. That we are part of the Earth. That we are Earth. That we are that part of the Earth that has been endowed with the capacity to think, to invent, to imagine, to cry, to laugh, to love, to venerate our Creator. We're an important part of the Earth, but we are Earth. And we need the Earth to subsist, to continue. The Earth doesn't need us, but we do need her. Anything that hurts Mother Earth is a crime against humanity. President Morales has often said that one of the most important human rights is to take care of Mother Earth, because we need her to survive. But, the problem is really an ethical problem. The ethical problem that has been exacerbated ever since the Industrial Revolution by taking God, love, solidarity, call it whatever you want, from the center of human activity, and in its place putting greed and lust for more and more material things. The churches, prophecy is an important dimension of all religions, but prophetic voices are hardly to be heard. You don't hear prophetic voices. What is a prophetic voice? It's a clear, unequivocal denunciation of whatever hurts human beings, and now we have to include whatever hurts Mother Earth, because then they're also hurting human beings. But I say there are some exceptions. Very soon we will be celebrating the anniversary, the centenary of the birth of Archbishop Proaño in Ecuador. And there have been great exceptions, not too many, but a few. But God is now seen fit to raise in our midst, because the last big religious prophet that we had was Martin Luther King. But now in Latin America, God is raising lay prophets. And President Evo Morales is one of the very greatest. He's not only a great political leader, he's a prophet. That is to say, trying to put us back on track on how we relate to one another and how we relate to Mother Earth. It stands to reason that if you do come to agree that, for example, this climate catastrophes that are the human tragedy that is resulting from this climate change, we know now that at least 90% of it is man-made. This is what they call the anthropogenic nature of this crisis. It's man-made. Therefore, somebody has to assume responsibility. Those who provoke the crisis. You know, Texas is a rather large, territorially speaking, state. But population-wise, it is not that big. It's 23 million people. And yet, there is more greenhouse effect gas emissions from Texas than from the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. This has led me to believe in something that I'm going to mention it here for the first time. It's very harsh, and I don't like to, I think about it as I try to explain to myself, how can we understand Copenhagen? How can we understand the total lack of sensitivity? Is it that the United States and the European countries do not know the urgency or the gravity of the problems regarding, for example, earth warming and climate change? They know. They know quite well the gravity. And, but they also know something else. They know that there's another huge problem on the earth. And that other huge problem is overpopulation. And so, malthus comes to their head. And they say, well, this is the time to allow 1 billion or 2 or 3 billion to die. They know that with this onslaught of climate change, who are the most vulnerable? It's the poor. And among the poor is the women and children. And so we are being told by Edward Wilson that within this century, within the next 90 years, 50% of fall living fauna and flora will disappear. And the rest will be sliding just behind it. And so, and people, there will be many, many people. You know, most people who are going to die as a result of this phenomena and consequences of it are not going to die so much drowned in the tsunami, I want to try because of the multiple wars you will see of people going to get arable land, to struggle for food, and for land and for water. The wars will be fought very soon over water, like up to now they have been fought over oil, for example. And that's what is going to be happening. And the sad conclusion to which I have come, and I pray to God that I'm wrong, that it couldn't be that way. But it looks to me that the United States and those Europeans who had the goal to be so callous in Copenhagen, they are betting on death. They are wrongly thinking that if a couple of billion people die, you are taking care of the excess, or at least you're beginning to take care of the overpopulation. But that won't resolve the problem because those people who are going to die are not the ones who are causing the problem. I said, Texas alone produces more emissions than the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. So it's the rich developed countries that are causing the problem. This has to be changed. But the United Nations was created in such a fashion as not to allow change. They have a whole system of procedures that become like a cobweb enveloping any initiative and then sending it to an open-ended working group, better now called never-ending working group. That's what it is. It's all funny. And it's a dictatorship. The United States thinks that it has a right to own the world because they did so much in the Second World War. Many Americans died. An infinite greater number of Russians died, more than 20 million. For the United States, the Second World War was a great big business feat because American economy did not correct itself by the New Deal. It became strong as a result of the war. The war is an American business. It's into that business. And that's why its first reaction to any problem is war. But, so how do we change it? We got to, I said while I was at the United Nations, I'm going to be finishing in about 2 minutes. I said, the United Nations is beyond reform. It's gone too far. It's beyond reform or patchwork. The United Nations needs to be reinvented. It has to be brought up to the knowledge and the needs of the 21st century. That's what I've been doing since I left New York, working on this reinvention, which will soon, rather soon, be the proposal will be presented. It's a new thing, no veto power, no permanency. How can you understand that the most influential nation member of the Security Council is the biggest warmongering nation in the history of mankind? So it's ridiculous. And it is a permanent member of the Security Council. How can you understand that the only country in history not to have complied with the judgment of the World Court is a permanent member of the World Court? So from now on, you don't comply, you are out. And you commit aggression, you are judged, and you will have to be out of even any kind of, being even a candidate for the Security Council. several things have to be changed. We would love for every country to participate, but there's no point in having a country that does not believe in a United Nations to be there. It's like having the, what do you call it, scorpion? The scorpion in your sheets in the bed. The United States has demonstrated that it hates the United Nations. It's against multilateralism. And so the time has come to speak with truth. You know, love, as much as we love an individual or a country, that doesn't mean covering up. Love requires frankness. So I say this, that the United States will choose to participate and become a member of the human family and desist from the notion of becoming the global empire. It has not abandoned that dream. It has not. You know, the plan that the Wolfowitz gang called the Project New American Century. Some people, I heard some people as much as 2 years ago say, forget about that. That is gone, and it's dead and gone. It's very much alive and kicking. It's very much alive. The project for the New America, the United States' fundamental goal is the control of the world. And as much as we love them, and as much as we have to fight more. We have to fight with always with love, and always non-violently. We must follow, we must once and for all answer that perennial question among human beings, whether the end justify the means. Well, Gandhi says, don't forget that the means that you use to procure something will be the seed from which tomorrow will sprout. And Jesus said, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. That's why our great prophets of today, President Evo Morales, which is one of my favorite prophets, he insists so much in the non-violent but firm approach to rightness. The Tribunal for Climate Change has to be created within the context of the United Nations, of the reinvented United Nations. And there's not going to be any, it doesn't matter whether somebody is a member or not a member, or whether somebody has subscribed the Kyoto Agreement or any other agreement. Not being part of an agreement that is supposed to do away with certain crimes does not give you license to commit, to perpetrate the crimes that those protocols are meant to do away with. And that's what is happening. And so it will not be the Security Council. If the Security Council doesn't move fast, the General Assembly, the G192, by majority, will decide on measures to be taken against aggressive nations that are hurting Mother Earth and humankind. God bless. I'm sorry for being so long-winded.